I want you to picture a deeply tense moment.
Oh, it really was.
Yeah, so it's April 20th, 1974, and you are sitting inside this hotel ballroom in Nauvoo, Illinois.
Right in the heart of where all this history happened.
Exactly. And outside there is this heavy spring thunderstorm that is just absolutely rattling the windows.
A very dramatic setting for what was about to happen.
It really is. So inside, the atmosphere is, just as charged. A prominent historian, Dr. Reed C. Durham Jr., he steps up to the podium.
Right, he was delivering his presidential address to the Mormon History Association.
Yeah, and what he says next literally shatters decades of institutional silence.
It completely upended things.
I mean, he unveils this deeply intertwined, highly controversial history between two massive, powerful organizations.
Two organizations that honestly had spent over a century virtually at war with each other.
Which is wild to think about today, but that is exactly our mission for this deep dive.
We really have our work cut out for us today.
We do. We have a massive stack of sources today. We're talking historical records, old lodge minutes, contemporary diaries, and modern scholarly treatises.
And the goal here is to explore one of the most intense, surprising, and frankly dramatic intersections of fraternal ritualism and religion in 19th century America.
Right. We are looking at the collision, the conflict, and the eventual and almost unbelievable reconciliation between speculative Freemasonry and the Latter-day Saints.
It's a massive story.
It is. Okay, so let's unpack this.
Well, to really grasp the gravity of this whole thing, we have to travel back to a time of profound political and religious volatility on the American frontier.
Right, the 1840s.
Exactly. You might actually notice my backdrop today. It's designed to look exactly like an 1840s frontier Masonic hall.
Oh yeah, I see the rough-hewn timber framing.
Yeah, and imagine the symbolic tracing boards leaning against the walls, the flickering candlelight.
It definitely sets the mood.
This was the environment where our story really catches fire. We have to start in western Illinois, in a city called Nauvoo, right at the dawn of the 1840s.
Right, so let's set the stage for why the Latter-day Saints are even in Illinois at this point. They had just arrived, right?
Yes, they were very recent arrivals.
And from what I understand, it wasn't exactly a peaceful migration.
Oh, it was far from it. In the winter of 1838 to 1839, the Latter-day Saints, commonly known as Mormons, were violently expelled from the state of Missouri.
Violently expelled. That's a heavy phrase.
It was a horrific situation. This was under the infamous exterminating order issued by Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs.
Wait, an actual exterminating order?
Yes, literally. The order stated that the Mormons must be treated as enemies and, quote, exterminated or driven from the state.
Wow. That is terrifying.
It was. You had thousands of refugees fleeing across the frozen Mississippi River into Illinois, completely destitute.
I can't even imagine.
They lost their homes, their farms, their businesses, everything.
So you have this deeply traumatized population arriving in a brand new state. That has to create a massive amount of desperation for the leadership. I'd imagine they are looking for anything, literally anything, that offers security.
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
They're looking for social respectability, institutional security, and above all, political alliances.
Right, so Missouri-style expulsion never happens to them again.
Exactly. That desperation for security creates the perfect storm for a political alliance. And that's where we enter a man named Abraham Jonas.
Okay, who is Abraham Jonas?
In 1840, the Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of Illinois was newly reconstituted, and Jonas was its very first Grand Master.
Okay, so he's a very big deal in the Masonic world.
Huge deal. But Jonas isn't just a prominent Freemason. He's also a highly influential Whig politician from Columbus, which is a town in Adams County, Illinois.
Ah, okay. Let's pause and look at the political map here. How does a Whig politician look at a massive group of traumatized religious refugees and see an opportunity?
Well, you have to understand that Adams and Hancock counties were fiercely contested political battlegrounds between the Whig Party and the Democratic Party.
Right, it was all about the numbers.
Exactly. Jonas looks at this massive influx of Latter-day Saint refugees and sees a burgeoning, highly unified voting bloc.
So he wants their votes.
He absolutely wants to cultivate their support to advance his own legislative ambitions. Specifically, he wants his town of Columbus to beat out the rival city of Quincy to become the county seat.
Oh, I see. Local politics at its finest.
Right. If he can secure the Mormon vote, he wins the county. It's just math.
The political motive is incredibly transparent there. He wants their votes, and they want his institutional protection.
A classic frontier quid pro quo.
So how does he actually use his position as a Grand Master to forge this alliance?
On October 15, 1841, Grand Master Jonas uses his executive authority to issue a formal dispensation.
A dispensation.
Yes. This authorizes the establishment of a new Masonic lodge in the Mormon city. It's called Nauvoo Lodge under Dispensation, or UD.
Wait, for those of us who aren't familiar with Masonic protocol, what does under dispensation actually mean? Is that like a temporary status?
It is essentially a probationary lodge. Yeah. A Grand Master can issue a dispensation allowing a group of Masons to meet, initiate candidates, and conduct business temporarily.
But it's not permanent yet.
No, they don't have a permanent official charter yet. That has to be voted on by the entire Grand Lodge at their annual meeting.
Got it. So they're on a trial run.
Exactly. So Nauvoo Lodge UD starts operating. By December, they are holding their first official meeting in the office of Hiram Smith, who is Joseph Smith's brother, to adopt bylaws and process petitions for membership.
Okay, so they're getting organized. But when do things really start accelerating? Because from the sources, it seems like there's a specific date where this local lodge suddenly just explodes into something unprecedented.
You're completely right. That happens on March 15, 1842. Grand Master Abraham Jonas travels to Nauvoo to personally preside over the formal installation of the lodge's officers.
Okay, March 15th. Where are they meeting?
They meet in the upper assembly room of Joseph Smith's newly built red brick store.
Let's talk about who is in that room. Who is actually running this new Masonic lodge?
If you look at the initial roster of officers installed that day, it is a literal who's who of the Latter-day Saint ecclesiastical hierarchy.
Really? Like the top leader?
Oh yeah. You have George Miller, a presiding bishop, acting as worshipful master. You have Apostle Heber C. Kimball as junior deacon. Bishop Newell K. Whitney is treasurer.
Wow, so it's completely intertwined with the church leadership from day one.
Completely. Even John C. Bennett, who is a highly controversial figure, is made secretary.
Now, I noticed in the source materials that Joseph Smith Jr. isn't on that list of initial officers, even though it's his building. He wasn't even a Mason at this point, was he?
No, he was not. However, he is appointed to serve pro tempore as the grand installing chaplain for the ceremony.
Wait, is that normal?
Not at all. It is highly unusual for a non-Mason to hold that kind of role. But his non-member status changes almost immediately.
Here we go.
Right. During that very installation on March 15th, Grand Master Jonas presents a special dispensation. This document authorizes the Nauvoo Lodge to receive the membership petitions of Joseph Smith and his first presidency counselor, Sidney Rigdon.
Okay, receiving petitions makes sense.
But the dispensation also says they can act upon them instanter.
Instanter, meaning instantly, like right then and there.
Precisely. That evening, Jonas initiates both Smith and Rigdon as entered apprentices.
Wow.
And it gets faster. The very next day, March 16th, 1842, they are passed to the degree of Fellowcraft and then raised to the sublime degree of Master Mason.
Okay, I have to highlight how completely wild this timeline is for anyone familiar with the tradition.
It's unheard of.
It's like walking onto a college campus on a Monday as a freshman, and by Tuesday afternoon, they hand you a PhD without making you attend a single class or write a dissertation.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
What is so fascinating here is just how severe a departure this was from traditional Masonic jurisprudence.
Let's break down the mechanics of how this usually works, just for contrast.
Yeah, normally, to advance through the 3 degrees of ancient craft masonry, a candidate must spend weeks, often months, studying between each degree.
What are they studying? What takes months?
They have to memorize complex ritual catechisms.
Like question and answer format?
Exactly. These are long, highly intricate dialogues explaining the moral symbolism of the working tools, the meaning of the passwords, and the ethical obligations of the fraternity.
And I'm guessing they have to prove they know this stuff.
Oh, absolutely. They have to demonstrate strict proficiency in these catechisms before their brethren in open lodge, before they're allowed to take the next step.
That sounds intense.
It requires intense memorization, dedication, time, and the consensus of the entire lodge that the man is morally and intellectually ready.
But with Joseph Smith, Jonas just waves a wand and bypasses all of that.
He totally bypassed it.
Does Nauvoo Lodge view this as like a one-time special exception for the leader of the church, or do they adopt this as their new standard?
They adopt it as the new normal. Nauvoo Lodge takes this special instanter dispensation and essentially treats it as a blanket operating procedure for everyone.
You're kidding.
Nope, they start advancing men at breakneck speed. Within just 5 months, Nauvoo Lodge initiates 286 candidates and raises nearly as many to Master Mason.
That pace is staggering. How does that compare to a normal lodge at the time?
Well, a typical frontier lodge in Illinois might initiate 5 to 10 men in an entire year.
5 to 10 a year versus almost 300 in 5 months. That's insane.
Nauvoo is doing hundreds, and it doesn't stop there. By early 1844, they've established 2 additional lodges in Nauvoo Helm Lodge and Nye Lodge.
So they're expanding.
Yes, plus neighboring branches across the river in Iowa, like Rising Sun Lodge. Over 1,500 Latter-day Saint men are raised as Master Masons.
1,500.
Yes, and that includes almost all the top ecclesiastical leadership. Brigham Young, Willard Richards, John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff.
Let me do the math on that. If they have 1,500 men, how does that impact the political balance of power within the fraternity in Illinois?
It completely upends it. Within a couple of years, the Latter-day Saint Masons in and around Nauvoo outright outnumber all other Masons in the entire state of Illinois combined.
Oh my gosh. It is a demographic takeover.
A complete takeover.
I can imagine how terrifying that must have been for the established older lodges. I mean, they bring these refugees in, give them a charter, and suddenly the refugees are the undeniable majority.
They were panicked.
How did the neighboring lodges react?
They reacted with intense, immediate resistance. You could look at Bodley Lodge No. 1 in nearby Quincy. They became the absolute tip of the spear in the resistance against Nauvoo.
Quincy, right? The rival town for the county seat.
Exactly. In July 1842, Bodley Lodge adopts formal resolutions protesting everything happening upriver.
What were their specific procedural complaints? What mechanics of masonry were the Nauvoo Masons allegedly breaking?
Bodley Lodge had a laundry list of grievances. First, they cited mass balloting.
How does normal balloting work?
In a normal Masonic lodge, when a man petitions to join, the members vote using a box filled with white balls and black cubes.
Okay, white is yes, black is no.
Right. One black cube, a black ball, universally rejects the candidate. It's a system designed to ensure absolute harmony and rigorous character vetting.
So what was Nauvoo doing?
Nauvoo was allegedly voting on large groups of candidates all at once, instead of properly vetting their character individually.
So they are bypassing the foundational vetting process of the fraternity just to get the numbers up. What else?
They cited the total disregard for candidate proficiency, pointing out the breakneck speed of advancement we just talked about.
Right.
And they were particularly furious about the inclusion of John C. Bennett as the lodge secretary.
Okay, you mentioned him earlier. Who is John C. Bennett, and why does his presence cause such a massive uproar?
John C. Bennett was a charismatic, highly ambitious man who had quickly risen to become the mayor of Nauvoo and a trusted advisor to Joseph Smith.
Sounds like a prominent guy.
He was, but the Masons in Quincy knew his background. Bennett had previously been an active Mason in Ohio, but he was expelled from the fraternity there for gross moral misconduct.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Masonic law dictates that an expelled Mason cannot be recognized or allowed into any regular lodge under any circumstances.
Yet here he was, acting as the secretary of the largest lodge in Illinois.
Exactly. It was a massive slap in the face to Masonic law.
That sounds like a huge red flag for the surrounding lodges. But it seems like their procedural complaints were masking a much deeper fear.
Oh, absolutely. Underneath the complaints about balloting and proficiency, there was profound political terror.
The numbers.
Right. Bodley Lodge and others realized the math. Because the Mormons now held the numerical majority of Masons in the state, they could simply walk into the next annual communication of the Grand Lodge of Illinois and democratically vote to take over the entire state fraternity.
Wow. They could elect their own Grand Master.
They could elect their own Grand Master, rewrite the rules, anything they wanted.
And outside the lodge, the local Whigs and Democrats in Quincy must have felt incredibly threatened by this unified voting bloc.
The regional tension was boiling over. The non-Mormon citizens saw Abraham Jonas's political alliance with the Saints as a direct threat to the democratic institutions of the region.
They felt like they were losing control of their own state?
Yes. The pressure on Jonas becomes absolutely unbearable. His political rivals are weaponizing the Nauvoo Lodge against him in the press.
So what does he do?
On August 11th, 1842, which is less than 5 months after he initiated out, Joseph Smith Jonas is forced to issue an injunction suspending the dispensation of Nauvoo Lodge.
Wow, she just pulls the plug. How did the Nauvoo Masons respond to being shut down?
Well, at first they appeal. A new Grand Master, Meredith Helm, takes over later that year.
Okay, so Jonas is out.
Right. Helm sends a special committee to Nauvoo to investigate the allegations. The Cooney comes back and essentially says, look, they are acting out of extreme zeal and severe inexperience, but they are acting in good faith.
So they get a pass.
Sort of. Helm reinstates their dispensation in November 1842, but it's a fragile peace and it shatters very quickly.
What causes the final break between Nauvoo and the Grand Lodge?
The regional anti-Mormon hostility accelerates throughout 1843. The Grand Lodge of Illinois faces immense, mounting pressure from the public to sever all ties with the Saints.
The public is just turning against them entirely.
Completely. By late 1843, the Grand Lodge demands that Nauvoo surrender its records and its dispensation. They outright refuse to grant them a permanent charter.
Do the Nauvoo leaders surrender the records?
They absolutely refuse.
Really?
Yeah. They see this as just another form of the religious and political persecution they fled in Missouri. They actually double down.
How do you double down when your charter is pulled?
In April 1844, they dedicate a massive 3-story Masonic hall in Nauvoo, the most elaborate public building in the city, and they just keep operating autonomously, completely ignoring the Grand Lodge's orders.
They just go rogue. That defiance definitely sets the stage for a tragic, violent climax. We are moving toward June 1844 now.
Yes. The tension reaches a breaking point. On June 27, 1844, an armed mob storms Carthage jail, where Joseph and Hiram Smith are being held on charges of treason.
Right.
The mob isn't just a group of random outlaws, though. It contains prominent citizens and militiamen from Hancock County. And crucially, historical records indicate it includes active Freemasons affiliated with Warsaw Lodge Number 21.
Okay, let's look really closely at the accounts of that day. We have eyewitness records from John Taylor and Willard Richards, 2 apostles, who were in the jail cell with the Smiths. Paint the picture of what happens in those final moments.
It is a suffocatingly hot summer afternoon. The men in the jail are incredibly tense. Suddenly, a mob with blackened faces rushes up the stairs.
Blackened faces to hide their identities.
Exactly. They start firing musket balls through the heavy wooden door. Hiram Smith is shot in the face and killed instantly.
I know, that's brutal.
Joseph Smith realizes the end. He has a pepperbox pistol, he fires it blindly into the hallway, and then he rushes to the second-story window. He looks out at the armed men below, raises his hands, and yells out, "O Lord, my God."
Now, to someone who doesn't know the history, that just sounds like a standard plea to heaven in a moment of terror, just a guy crying out. But sources point out this phrase has a highly specific meaning.
It absolutely does. To the men in that mob, and to contemporary Latter-day Saint and Masonic historians, it was recognized immediately as something highly specific.
What is it?
Those are the first words of the Masonic grand hailing sign of distress. "O Lord, my God, is there no help for the widow's son?"
What is the mechanical function of that sign within the fraternity? Like, what is supposed to happen when a Mason uses it?
It is a universal fraternal appeal. It is taught specifically in the Master Mason degree. It is a sacred obligation requiring any Masonic brother who hews it to immediately halt violence, drop their weapons, and fly to the relief of the brother in distress,
Even in a mob?
even at the risk of their own life. Joseph Smith, facing a mob he knew contained Masons, is invoking his ultimate fraternal safety net.
But the plea goes completely ignored. They fire, he falls from the window, and he is killed. This presents a really haunting question about human nature.
It really does.
I mean, when a person is pushed to the absolute breaking point, what wins out? A solemn, sacred oath taken at an altar to protect a fraternal brother, or the sheer political terror that this brother is gaining too much power and threatening your society?
In Carthage, we see exactly which one won.
The ideal of universal brotherhood was entirely overridden by frontier politics and religious paranoia.
It is a profound tragedy. And the institutional rift following the assassination was absolute. Just a few months later, in October 1844, the Illinois Grand Lodge formally declares all Mormon lodges to be clandestine.
Clandestine? Meaning what, exactly?
Officially severing them from the Fellowship of Ancient Craft Masonry forever. They are unrecognized, illegal lodges in the eyes of the fraternity.
The risk was total. But to really grasp why the surrounding communities were so incredibly paranoid, why they viewed the Mormons not just as political rivals, but as something deeply alien and threatening, we have to look at what was happening inside Nauvoo.
We do.
Specifically, we need to look at what Joseph Smith was doing in the upper room of that red brick store just 7 weeks after his lightning initiation.
To understand the paranoia, we have to examine the introduction of the temple endowment.
Right.
On May 4th, 1842, which is exactly 7 weeks after becoming a master, Mason Joseph Smith introduces a new, highly sacred liturgy to an inner circle of 9 top church leaders.
And where does he do this?
The space they use is the exact same upper room in the red brick store that they use for Masonic meetings.
Wow, literally the same room.
Yes. And all 9 of those men, including Brigham Young, Heber C. Kimball, Willard Richards, and Hiram Smith, are Master Masons.
When you lay the historical records side by side, the structural parallels between this new temple endowment and 19th century speculative Freemasonry are massive.
They are impossible to ignore.
Let's break down the mechanics of these parallels for a minute.
Okay, well, both traditions utilize a structured, dramatic progression to teach their narratives.
Like a play.
Kind of, yes. Both involve solemn, binding covenants of confidentiality regarding the rituals. They both use specific physical hand clasps.
Hand clasps.
Yes, which are called grips in Masonry and tokens in the endowment. They use ritual gestures known as signs. They use sacred keywords or names associated with these grips.
The vocabulary of the ritual is very similar.
It is. They both involve ceremonial vestments worn over normal clothing, and they both feature symbolic dialogues conducted across a fabric barrier or a veil.
Can you elaborate on the concept of the veil? How does that function in Masonry compared to the endowment?
Let's look at the York Rite of Masonry, specifically the Royal Arch degree, which we know is being practiced by early Latter-day Saints who were Masons.
Okay.
In that degree, candidates pass through 4 successive, brightly colored veils to enter the Holy of Holies of the rebuilt temple. At each veil, they must give a specific password and sign to a guard.
And in the Nauvoo endowment?
In the endowment, candidates similarly give signs, tokens, and words at a literal veil to gain admission into the celestial room, which represents the presence of God.
It's a very direct parallel.
Very direct. You also see parallels in the vestments, the lambskin apron of the Mason and the green fig leaf apron of the endowment.
So the physical mechanics, the vocabulary of the ritual are undeniably linked. But there are also distinct fundamental differences in the core purpose of these rituals.
Yes, the telos, as scholars call it, the ultimate end goal.
Right. What is the ultimate goal of Freemasonry?
Freemasonry is essentially secular and civic. Its primary narrative is an allegory centered around the construction of King Solomon's temple and the martyrdom of its chief architect, Hiram Abiff.
Okay, so it's a moral allegory.
Exactly. Its whole goal is moral self-improvement, fraternal fellowship, and making good men better citizens in this mortal life. It is about building a moral society here and now.
How does that contrast with the Nauvoo endowment?
The Nauvoo endowment is entirely sacerdotal. It is intensely theological.
Meaning it's focused on God and heaven.
Right. The primary narrative isn't about Hiram Abiff. It's a massive cosmic drama encompassing the premortal council, the creation of the earth, the fall of Adam and Eve, and the journey of humanity back to the presence of God.
So it's way beyond civic virtue.
Far beyond it. Its objective is eternal salvation, receiving the highest priesthood ordinations, and achieving theological exaltation.
There is another big difference, too, regarding who participates. Right?
Good point. While Masonry was strictly a male fraternity, the endowment was egalitarian in its sacerdotalism. It was conferred equally upon men and women.
When non-Mormon critics looked at this structural overlap, they immediately pointed fingers and yelled, plagiarism. They accused Joseph Smith of simply lifting their secret rites to build his own church.
They were outraged.
But the early Latter-day Saints did not view this as theft at all. How did they intellectually reconcile using Masonic mechanics in their sacred temple rites?
They viewed this through a theological framework known as restorationism.
Restorationism.
Yes. To the Mormons, Joseph Smith wasn't plagiarizing, he was rescuing. Early church leaders firmly believed that speculative Freemasonry was a corrupted, degenerate vestige of an ancient divine priesthood.
A priesthood from when?
From ancient patriarchs like Enoch, and rituals originally practiced in Solomon's temple.
So they believed Masonry had the original blueprint, but had sort of lost the instruction manual?
Exactly. They believed that over centuries of apostasy, the rituals had been stripped of their saving authority and cosmic context, leaving only a hollow, ethical morality play.
Okay, I like to think of speculative Masonry like a corrupted, zipped computer file.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. It has all the right folders, the file names look somewhat familiar, but you can't actually read the documents inside or run the program. The data is scrambled.
Right, it doesn't execute properly.
So early church leaders believed that God was using Joseph Smith to unzip the file, to restore the corrupted data to its original, pristine, cosmic purpose. He wasn't stealing the file, he was fixing it.
That's a perfect analogy. We actually have primary sources from the time that explicitly outline this zipped file theology.
Really? What do they say?
Joseph Fielding, an early convert, wrote in his Nauvoo diary in late 1843, he said, "Many have joined the Masonic institution. This seems to have been a stepping stone or preparation for something else, the true origin of Masonry."
Wow, a stepping stone.
Yes. And Apostle Heber C. Kimball wrote a letter to a friend saying, "Bro, Joseph says Masonry was taken from priesthood but has become degenerated, but many things are perfect."
They were very open about it.
Very open. Brigham Young even started referring to the temple endowment simply as celestial masonry.
Celestial masonry.
Yeah.
That theological integration didn't just stay hidden inside the ritual room either. It just exploded into early Latter-day Saint material culture and architecture.
Oh, it was everywhere.
They proudly embraced Masonic iconography because they believed it belonged to them originally.
If you look at early LDS architecture, it is completely steeped in these shared symbols.
Give us some visual examples. What are we looking for?
You see the all-seeing eye carved into the exterior keystones of their temples. In Masonry, that represents the watchful care of the grand architect. In Mormonism, it represents divine omniscience.
And the square and compasses.
Yes, the square and compasses, which is the absolute most recognizable Masonic symbol, you see it embroidered directly onto their sacred temple garments and carved into woodwork, symbolizing righteousness and boundaries of moral conduct.
What other symbols do we see making the jump?
They adopted the beehive.
Which is huge in Utah today.
Exactly. In Masonic lectures, the beehive symbolizes industry and cooperative labor. It became the central heraldic symbol of the entire territory the Latter-day Saints would eventually settle.
You also see clasped hands, right?
Yes, clasped hands carved onto temple facades. You even see cosmic stones, suns, moons, and stars on the Nauvoo temple, which mirror both Masonic cosmological symbols and the Mormon theology of different degrees of heavenly glory.
This theological blending was so absolute that when the Latter-day Saints were eventually forced to flee Nauvoo, crossing the frozen plains to the desolate Great Basin, they took these modified concepts with them.
They carried it all the way west.
They left the formal, secular Masonic lodges of Illinois behind, but they carried celestial masonry in their minds and in their architecture.
But organized secular Freemasonry wasn't done with them.
No, it wasn't. It was about to follow them right into the desert.
We are looking at a remarkable visual and geographic shift in our story right now. Imagine moving from the lush green riverbanks of the Mississippi and Illinois to the harsh, freezing alkali dust of the Utah desert.
Completely different world.
Entirely. By the late 1850s, Brigham Young has established an isolated, totalizing theocratic commonwealth in the Great Basin. And he is deeply, profoundly suspicious of national fraternities.
I mean, I would be too. He remembers Carthage.
He remembers the unanswered cry of distress. Consequently, formal, secular Freemasonry is completely non-existent in early Utah.
How does it finally arrive then? If Brigham Young has locked down the territory, who brings the lodge into the desert?
The United States government decides to force the issue.
Of course.
In 1857, President James Buchanan believes the Mormons are in open rebellion against federal authority. He sparks what becomes known as the Utah War.
Right.
Buchanan sends approximately 2,500 heavily armed federal troops, known as Johnston's Army, marching across the plains to suppress the theocracy and install non-Mormon territorial officials.
So you have a massive federal army occupying a hostile territory. Where do they set up camp?
The Army arrives in 1858 and establishes Camp Floyd in Cedar Valley, which is about 50 miles southwest of Salt Lake City. And here's where the history loops back on itself in a fascinating way.
How so?
Among these federal troops are 23 soldiers who are master masons. In their profound isolation in the desert, they want the familiar fellowship of the lodge. So they petition the Grand Lodge of Missouri for a dispensation to open a military lodge.
Wait, how does a military lodge function differently than a normal city lodge? Did they just, carry a charter in a backpack?
Essentially, yes. It's called a traveling warrant. It allows soldiers to hold lodge meetings wherever their regiment is stationed, as long as they have a secure location.
Wow, I had no idea that was a thing.
Yep. On March 6, 1859, the dispensation is granted. They form Rocky Mountain Lodge number 205, and they build the very first dedicated Masonic meeting hall in Utah territory.
Okay, I'm picturing the Grand Masonic temples on the East Coast with marble floors and giant pillars. What did this lodge in Camp Floyd actually look like?
It was incredibly rustic. We're talking about a 30 by 60-foot structure made entirely of adobe mud bricks, with 8-foot walls, a rough wood plank roof, and a floor made of packed dirt.
Mud and dirt, a bit of a downgrade from Nauvoo.
Definitely. They used whatever military supplies they could scavenge to create the symbolic altars and stations.
Who are the men actually running this dirt floor lodge?
The leadership of this lodge included men who were historically significant in their own right. The worshipful master was Captain John C. Robinson, who would go on to be a prominent Union brigadier general in the Civil War.
Okay.
His senior warden was Captain Henry Heath, who would become a famous Confederate major general. In fact, he's the man who accidentally triggered the Battle of Gettysburg.
Wait, really? The guy who started Gettysburg was running a mud brick lodge in Utah?
The very same. These men are holding lodge meetings in the dirt, initiating over 160 men and providing charitable relief to immigrants traveling through to California.
But let's look at the broader context of Camp Floyd for a second. This wasn't just a place of brotherly love and charity. It was the absolute hub of non-Mormon civic opposition to Brigham Young's theocracy.
It was enemy territory for the Saints.
They even published Utah's first secular anti-Mormon newspaper out of there, the Valley Tan. Consider the historical paradox here. The very army sent by the federal government to break the Mormons' power ends up reintroducing the exact fraternal order that the Mormons felt had betrayed them in Illinois. You literally couldn't script a more tense reunion.
It is a stunning historical irony. The military lodge eventually dissolves in 1861 when the Civil War breaks out and the troops are called back east to fight. But the door had been opened.
Freemasonry was back.
After the Civil War, you had the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1869, and vast deposits of silver and lead are discovered in the Utah mountains.
Which brings in a ton of outsiders.
Yes. It triggers a massive, unstoppable influx of non-Mormon miners, merchants, and federal officials. They're often referred to as Gentiles in the local terminology.
Do these new arrivals start their own lodges?
They do. They start forming permanent civilian lodges in Salt Lake City and the various mining towns. You get Mount Moriah Lodge, Wasatch Lodge, and Argenta Lodge, getting their charters from neighboring states like Nevada, Kansas, Montana, and Colorado.
So they're all importing their charters from outside.
Right, until January 16, 1872. That's when delegates from these 3 lodges convene in Salt Lake City and formally organize the most worshipful Grand Lodge of ancient free and accepted Masons of Utah.
They finally have their own Grand Lodge.
Yes, and the first Grand Master is a man named Obed F. Strickland.
So with the formation of an official sovereign Grand Lodge in Utah, how do they handle the Mormon population? Does that lingering tension from Illinois just fade away?
It does the exact opposite. That tension becomes the official codified law of the land for the next 112 years.
112 years.
We are talking about a century of blackballs. Almost from the moment the Grand Lodge of Utah is founded in 1872, they institute an unwritten ban. This policy completely keeps Latter-day Saints out of the fraternity.
Just a blanket ban.
And it wasn't just about stopping new Mormon converts from joining. They also banned visiting LDS Masons from other states from even stepping foot inside a Utah lodge room.
How does an unwritten ban actually work mechanically? I mean, if a Mormon man submits a petition, how do they ensure he doesn't get in?
It comes back to the ballot box we discussed earlier. Anytime a Mormon petitioned to join, a single member could drop a black cube into the voting box.
And one black cube is all it takes.
Exactly. Just one black ball universally rejects the candidate. Because the animosity was so uniformly high, Mormon candidates were blackballed with complete consistency across Wasatch, Mount Moriah, and Argenta lodges.
So the unwritten rule was just brutally enforced.
By 1883, this unwritten practice was codified as an official ruling by the Grand Master. And then, on January 21, 1925, it was formally written into the Masonic Code of Utah as Section 504.
So what exactly fueled this intense century-long Cold War? Why did they feel the need to write a law banning a specific religion?
This collects.
The sources point to 4 main killers of animosity. Let's break these down one by one, starting with what was likely the most public issue: polygamy.
Right. So Freemasonry has strict moral and civic requirements. An initiate swears an oath on the altar to uphold the civil law of the land, to avoid plots and conspiracies, and to maintain moral rectitude. By the late 19th century, the Latter-day Saint practice of plural marriage was not just a theological curiosity. It was a direct, open violation of federal law, specifically the Moral Anti-Bigamy Act of 1862 and later the Edmunds-Tucker Act.
So the Masons looked at a polygamist and just saw a criminal.
Exactly. Victorian Freemasons viewed polygamy as both an illegal act and an affront to civilized domesticity. They argued that a polygamist fundamentally could not be a Mason because he was openly defying the law of the government.
Therefore, his Masonic oaths were meaningless.
Precisely.
That makes logical sense from a legalistic standpoint. What is the second pillar?
The second pillar was intense civic and commercial warfare. Freemasonry in Utah became the fortress, the absolute social hub for the Gentile minority.
Because they were vastly outnumbered.
Yes. The Masonic leaders were heavily involved in the anti-Mormon Liberal Party, which was constantly battling the LDS-controlled People's Party for control of the territorial government, the public school system, and the courts.
How did this play out economically? I imagine a minority population in a theocracy feels incredibly vulnerable.
It was a battle for economic survival. The LDS Church had established ZCMI Zion's Cooperative Mercantile Institution and encouraged its members to boycott non-Mormon merchants.
Wow, a full boycott.
They wanted to keep the capital inside the church. In response, Gentile businessmen were pushed directly into the protective economic and social networks of the Masonic Lodge.
So the lodge was their shield.
Exactly. If you were a non-Mormon banker or merchant in Salt Lake City, the lodge was where you networked to survive a totalizing theocracy.
Let's look at the third pillar, which deals directly with the rituals. Oath incompatibility. What does that mean?
Utah Masons fundamentally did not believe a Latter-day Saint could take a Masonic oath in good faith.
Why not?
They argued that a Mormon's oaths in the temple endowment created an absolute ecclesiastical loyalty that superseded any civic or fraternal obligation. Basically, their argument was, if the prophet told you to do something that conflicted with your Masonic oath, you would obey the prophet without question. Therefore, your Masonic word was compromised before you even spoke it.
And the fourth pillar brings us right back to the red brick store in Nauvoo, the allegations of ritual plagiarism.
Yes. The Utah Masonic leadership harbored a deep, burning institutional resentment over Joseph Smith's incorporation of their secret grips, tokens, and penal signs into the temple endowment.
They couldn't let it go.
They viewed the LDS temple liturgy not as a divine restoration, but as a stolen, bastardized parody of the craft. They felt their most sacred secrets had been violated and mocked.
Who was the intellectual architect of this ban? Like, who was actually writing down these arguments?
The man who really crystallized all these arguments was Samuel H. Goodwin.
Who is he?
He was the Grand Secretary and a past Grand Master of Utah. In 1920 and 1924, he published highly influential texts, most notably Mormonism and Masonry.
Okay, so he's publishing books on this.
He laid out the intellectual architecture for the ban, arguing that Mormonism inherently suppressed free thought and that Joseph Smith had betrayed Masonic honor.
And his writings led to the law.
His writings provided the direct rationale for the 1925 Code Revision, Section 504, which explicitly banned LDS members and threatened any Utah Mason who converted to Mormonism with immediate trial and expulsion.
How did the Latter-day Saint leadership respond to this codified hostility? Did they even want to join the lodges?
The animosity was entirely mutual. Latter-day Saint leaders maintained their own deep institutional suspicion. While the older generation, like Brigham Young, remembered the betrayals of Nauvoo, the new generation just saw an entrenched political enemy.
Right, it just morphed into a new kind of feud.
In 1901, LDS Church President Lorenzo Snow publicly warned his members against joining secret societies. He invoked passages from the Book of Mormon about secret combinations, essentially warning that fraternal oaths could undermine a person's devotion to the priesthood and the church.
So both sides are actively telling their people to stay away from each other.
Yes. In 1934, another high-ranking LDS leader, Anthony W. Ivins, published a defense of the temple ceremonies, arguing they were of ancient divine origin and that the church needed absolutely no fraternal alliances.
You can even see this rivalry literally built into the architecture of Salt Lake City.
Oh, it's so visually striking.
Right. In 1927, the Masons dedicated the massive Salt Lake Masonic Temple. It's this incredibly imposing Egyptian revival fortress with specialized auditoriums. And where did they build it?
Just about a mile straight east of the Mormon Salt Lake Temple.
It was a massive stone counterweight, a physical declaration that they were there to stay and they would not be intimidated.
For decades, these two massive structures sat a mile apart on South Temple Street, representing two institutions completely locked in a demographic and cultural Cold War. A wall built of stone and legal codes.
Consider the paradox of a fraternity that prides itself globally on universality, on taking men of wildly different faiths, Christians, Muslims, Jews, and bringing them together on the level. And yet here they are, utilizing an explicit law to ban one specific religion.
It reveals a lot about human nature.
It reveals how intensely local politics and survival instincts can override foundational ideals. How does a Cold War like this ever thaw?
Well, the ice didn't begin to crack because of a sudden diplomatic summit between the Grand Master and the Prophet. It started with a storm in academia.
Which brings us back to our opening hook, April 20th, 1974, the thunderstorm in Nauvoo.
Exactly.
Dr. Reed C. Durham Jr. stands up at the Mormon History Association and delivers his address, Is There No Help for the Widow's Son?
The speech that changed everything.
He outlines with unflinching historical rigor the direct ritual borrowings from Masonry into the LDS temple liturgy. He talks about the parallels, Joseph Smith's final words at Carthage, and he even introduces an artifact called the Jupiter Talisman.
Yes, the Jupiter Talisman is a fascinating piece of this puzzle.
What exactly is it?
Durham presented evidence that Joseph Smith owned a silver talisman engraved with astrological symbols related to Jupiter, which has ties to folk magic and esoteric Masonic traditions.
So he's linking Smith to esoteric traditions.
Yeah. Durham was essentially arguing that early Mormonism was deeply, inextricably interwoven with the esoteric and fraternal culture of the 19th century.
How did the institutional church react to this presentation? I can't imagine they were thrilled.
The pushback was immediate. Durham was required to issue a letter clarifying his faith and reaffirming his belief in Joseph Smith's prophetic calling.
So they reined him in.
His paper was barred from official church publication. But you can't unring a bell.
The information was out there.
Unauthorized transcriptions of the address began circulating widely underground. It sparked an entire movement known as the New Mormon History.
Once that data was out there, other scholars began picking up the thread. You had academics like David John Berger in 1994 writing The Mysteries of Godliness, which detailed the liturgical development of the endowment from its Masonic roots.
Right.
You had Michael W. Homer in 2014 publishing Joseph's Temples, a comprehensive treatise on the relationship. The history was becoming normalized. It wasn't a dirty secret anymore. It was just historical context.
And while the historians were working on the LDS side, progressive reformers were moving inside the Grand Lodge of Utah.
Oh, really?
Yes. By the early 1980s, you have a new generation of Masons led by most worshipful Grand Master Arthur M. Burton. Burton and his cohort look at Section 504 and realize it is a relic of a bygone era.
The original reasons for the ban were completely obsolete. The LDS Church had officially abandoned the practice of polygamy way back in 1890.
Over a century prior.
The bitter territorial political clashes of the Liberal and People's parties were a century in the past. The justification for the ban simply didn't exist anymore.
So in January 1984, the Grand Lodge of Utah takes a monumental vote.
What do?
They officially repeal Section 504 of the Utah Masonic Code. They eliminate the prohibition against Latter-day Saints joining, and they restore visitation privileges to LDS Masons from outside the state.
Wow, it was the end of a century of institutional segregation.
It really was.
It is incredible how institutional healing works. It rarely starts at the very top of the hierarchy with a grand decree. It starts with brave historians like Reed Durham who are willing to face the raw data, and progressive reformers like Arthur Burton who recognize that inherited prejudices no longer match modern reality.
And that healing process culminated in a way that would have been utterly unimaginable to the men who built those two temples a mile apart.
What happened?
In 2008, a massive milestone is reached. Glenn A. Cook is installed as the most worshipful Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Utah.
And Glenn Cook wasn't just any Mason.
No, he was not.
He was a graduate of Brigham Young University's J. Reuben Clark Law School. He was a former appellate military judge. And crucially, he was an active, devout member of the Latter-day Saint faith.
He became the first church member in over a century to preside over Utah's Masonic fraternity.
His tenure demonstrated the complete normalization of relations. The boundary maintenance that had defined the 19th and 20th centuries had finally dissolved into mutual accommodation.
It was a beautiful thing to see.
And the LDS Church, for its part, also took a massive step toward transparency. In March 2019, they published an official Gospel Topics essay simply titled Masonry.
The 2019 essay is fascinating.
Why is it so significant?
The church officially, openly acknowledges Joseph Smith's membership in the craft. They don't hide the Nauvoo Lodge minutes anymore. They openly explain the shared ritual mechanics and the visual motifs between Masonic degree work and the Nauvoo endowment.
So they just laid it all out there.
But they maintain their theological framework.
Mm.
They frame Freemasonry as a pedagogical catalyst.
The catalyst theory.
Yes, the catalyst theory argues that the rituals of the lodge provided Joseph Smith with a symbolic vocabulary and a spatial framework that he then used under divine revelation to construct the church's highest sacerdotal ordinances.
It is a remarkable full circle moment.
Yeah.
You have the exact same historical data, the grips, the compasses, the Nauvoo minutes. In the 1920s, Samuel Goodwin used that data to build an exclusionary wall, arguing it proved Mormonism was a fraud. In the 1850s, Brigham Young used that same memory to retreat into isolation, fearing betrayal. And now, in the 21st century, both organizations are using that exact same data to foster transparency, open historical dialogue, and mutual respect.
It shows that even the most deeply entrenched cultural and religious Cold Wars can eventually thaw when people are willing to look at the past objectively and recognize that the battles of the 19th century don't have to dictate the relationships of today.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, from the freezing banks of the Mississippi to the dirt floors of Camp Floyd, all the way to the modern era of reconciliation. It has been a fascinating journey through a deeply complex piece of American history.
As we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought that branches out from this historical narrative.
Please do.
Throughout this entire story, both institutions, the Grand Lodge and the LDS Church, were utilizing rituals, secret handshakes, and bounded spaces to create a profound sense of safety and belonging for their members in a chaotic world.
Right, they were trying to build a sanctuary.
They fought so bitterly because they were essentially offering the same psychological sanctuary to their people. Today, we live in an era of absolute digital transparency, where secrecy is viewed with intense suspicion, and every aspect of our lives is broadcast publicly.
It's so true.
It makes you wonder, in our modern, hyper-connected society, where do we go to find that deeply bounded, sacred space? Have we lost the human necessity for a closed door? And if so, what are we replacing it with to feel safe?
That is exactly the kind of question we want you to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it encourages you to look closely at your own historical assumptions and to remember that the lines that divide us are rarely as permanent as they seem. Until next time, keep questioning and keep digging.